Sumita nació en la India, vive en San Francisco y se unió a nosotros. Venía trabajando en J.P. Morgan, ayudándonos en el proceso de IPO. Y bueno, luego decidió cambiar de bando y pasarse al bando de los buenos. Sumita, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergio. And I hope you guys can hear me okay. We struggled a little bit with the mic there. So it looks like I'm the only speaker who was able to make it here in person. So thank you for having me. And I'm really happy to be here. This is not just the first time I'm here for Punta Tech. It's the first time in Punta del Este, and this is my first time in Uruguay. So I'm super excited to be here, and it's been amazing to get to know all of you. I think I've met quite a few of you, and to see the country, it is beautiful. And to be honest, before I joined dLocal, I had never heard of Punta del Este, which is very sad, but that is true. And it's a magical place, and I think it just makes this whole event come alive. So thank you for having me here. I know I'm staying in between your dinner, so I'm going to try and keep this short and hopefully make it a little more interactive. So before I talk about dLocal, I did want to ask the audience a couple of questions. So if you don't raise your hand, I'll just ask some people to answer. So it's better if you raise your hand. The first question, and this is going to be a little bit like a quiz. I'm just going to give you some, if you guys don't mind, if you don't want to hear me, leave the room, but otherwise I would love to have you guys engage. And I'm going to ask questions. So the first one is I'm going to give you some tips about some companies. And maybe if you can take a guess at which company I'm talking about. So the first company, this was a company that challenged the incumbent market leader. The market leader had the option to buy this company for $50 million. And the incumbent company did not buy them for $50 million. About 10 years later, the incumbent company went bankrupt. And today, this company is valued at somewhere around $250 billion. Does anyone have a guess on who I'm talking about? That's perfect, yeah. And so the first, it's a really good answer because I gave you very little clues. So I'm talking about Blockbuster and Netflix. If you go back in 2000, Blockbuster had the option to buy Netflix for $50 million, and they did not buy Netflix for $50 million. And today, if you look at Netflix's valuation, it's anywhere between $200 and $250 billion, depending on the trading day. So that's a great guess. Second question, and this is a really easy one. This company went public, and if you go and read their S1, their filing document, they went with a positioning of we are the world's largest bookstore. Any guesses? That's right. And it's Amazon. If you actually go and read Amazon's S1, and by the way, you should read it because it's amazing to think about what was the vision for the company when they went public in 1997. And the first page of the S1 and everything about the S1 is really about books, about being able to sell books online, which was such a revolutionary concept then. And you think about what Amazon obviously has become today. And they started with books. That's how they went public. And what's really interesting is that the year they went public, their last 12-month revenue in that year was $32 million. That's how small they were when they went public. The third question that I had was to talk about why are these examples important? Why am I trying to go through some of these examples? I think there's one more company that I would like to touch upon, which is, again, two companies, the incumbent and the new company that did really well and challenged the incumbent. The incumbent had almost 50% share of the market in the US. And they were the market leader globally. I think they had about 20% share, global market share. And within about 5 years, I'm talking about 2009, I think in 2009, this company was the highest growing business in the world. And then within 5 or 6 years, their market share dropped really quickly, and within like 7 or 8 years, they actually stopped manufacturing their product. Does anyone know which company I'm talking about? I'll make it easier. It was in the communication space. That's right. So we spoke a little bit about BlackBerry earlier today. It is BlackBerry. And again, I think it's really interesting to think about how important BlackBerry was to quite a few of us who started our corporate careers with a BlackBerry. You couldn't think of a life without your BlackBerry at that point. And within a few years, it happened very, very quickly, but within a few years, they went from having half of the US market share to today, to I think, 0.01 or 0.02%. At one point, BlackBerry's valuation was $85 billion. So the point of all of these examples is to think about vision and to think about ambition. And I think that's going to be my first message today, which is I joined dLocal about a year back, a little less than a year back, right before the company went public. And I always get the question, why did I join dLocal? I had been a banker for almost 2 decades. I started my career in 2001, actually in India, and then came to the US and worked at Goldman and then at J.P. Morgan. I used to run J.P. Morgan's global fintech investment banking business. And that's where I met dLocal. I met Sergio, Andres, Seba, Hako, the whole team at dLocal. And I think what really motivated me to give up my career at J.P. Morgan, which I treasured, I'd spent years doing it, was really the people. I think I saw something special about dLocal. I think it was not an obvious answer for a lot of people. If I look back at that point, and I remember when we went on our roadshows, and I see Seba sitting here, I remember when we would go out on our initial roadshow, most investors had never heard of dLocal. And when we met initial public company investors, in most fintech companies' cases, you're in top 100 rankings, top 10 rankings, you've already done multiple rounds of venture funding. None of that was really true for dLocal. We'd had some capital raisings. We had been lucky to be profitable, so we did not need to raise as much capital. But when I made the decision to join dLocal, it was really, I was choosing the people. I felt that this was a team that was different, and I felt like I could belong here. And so even though I have no LATAM connection, in fact, I don't speak in Spanish, I don't eat beef and pork, and yet, I joined this company that just felt like it resonated with me. And I think it was a really amazing journey that I've had, and we are just getting started. And that goes back to where I started this conversation from, which is it's really important, as for those of you who are founders, CEOs, people running businesses, it's really important to have ambition, and it's really important to have a vision that goes beyond what's the immediate thing that you're working on today. And I think that's really hard to do because most of us are super busy and we get caught up in our daily lives. But it's important to think about companies that have had journeys like BlackBerry's. Why did BlackBerry fail after succeeding to that extent? What went wrong? How did Amazon become what it has become today? Did Jeff Bezos, did he know that in 1997 when he was going public that he's going to build a company that is that big? And I think it's important to keep that vision and ambition in mind as you think about what is it that you're building. The second topic and message that I would like to touch upon is our public company journey. We get this question on why did we go public? And what does it mean for dLocal to actually go public? This is a really important question that a lot of companies face in their journey. For those of you who are thinking about that decision, should you go public or should you stay private longer? I think the current market volatility clearly indicates that there could be a little bit of a difference between what you could get valued at in the private markets versus public markets. Maybe it's actually better to remain private longer because you could get the advantage of a lot of funding chasing companies today. For us at dLocal, I think if we were to go back and think about what were some of the key things that we wanted to do as we went public. We felt that going public was actually a branding event for us. It was an event that put us on the global map. I think the fact that we were a unicorn coming out of Uruguay that no one had heard of, it was important for us to take that step to actually go public. And I think, humbly speaking, I would say that we went public, and I think it made a difference to not just what dLocal became, but also what it means for the overall LATAM ecosystem. I think we were one of the first companies that went public from LATAM on the NASDAQ stock exchange with very little pre-IPO branding and marketing. And I think we were able to achieve what we did because of the fact that we focused a lot on how do we tell our investor story? What should we talk about our business for investors to actually buy into our vision? Here was a company coming out of Uruguay. They had a global vision. We talked about the fact that we don't think of ourselves as just a LATAM business. Today, 90% of our revenues come from LATAM, 10% comes from outside LATAM. But we have a vision that's bigger. We are in about 30 countries today, but we intend to have many more countries on our platform. And I think the fact that we were able to tell a story that resonated with investors made the IPO the success that it was. And we think that for those of you who are taking that decision, going public is not just about raising capital. It's not just a milestone. It's the start of a journey. Once you go public, there's a lot of ups and downs that every company faces. But I think going public for us as dLocal was really a journey into becoming a brand and making sure that we can start a journey with our clients and our merchants with an element of trust. Because going public was also a big event that helped us build trust with our merchants. I think the other really important factor to also keep in mind would be, we get this question, oh, your stock went up, and then there's been a lot of market volatility. How do you think about dLocal vis-a-vis the broader LATAM ecosystem and valuations for our company versus valuations for other companies in the region? And I think we're going to take a very long-term view. If you look at our business, I think if you just look at the number of fintechs that went public last year, for those of you who follow the space closely, you would know that about 40 companies last year in the financial technology space went public. And of those 40 companies, I think only a handful, maybe about 4 when I last checked, is trading above their IPO prices. And yes, dLocal is one of them. I think for companies to go public and build what I would call a trading comp set is actually good for everyone. I think that more and more companies, as they embark on these public company journeys, will bring in a lot more maturity into the ecosystem. And we are going to take a long-term view. We are literally just getting started. I think one interesting anecdote, if you think about Mercado Libre, again, I don't know how many of you, invested in Meli when they went public in 2007. But if you go back and read their S1, what do you think? Was their revenue less than 100 million, between 100 and 200, greater than 200? Any guesses? Yes, it was actually less than 100 million. So if you look at Mercado Libre's prospectus, their revenue the prior year before they went public was about $52 million. And today, I think they're on track to achieve about $6.5 billion of revenue for the last year. Again, I think goes back to this fact that we at dLocal, we are just getting started. We hope we can build a company that's sustainable, that grows, and that we can make not just Uruguay proud, but Latin America proud, and maybe the fintech community proud. And that's really what we are hoping to do today. Before I let you guys go out for your dinner, one other thought or message that is close to my heart, and so I'm going to speak about it. I think when Sergio asked me, and I don't see where is Sergio, but when Sergio called me and asked me that, hey, Sumita, do you want to come and speak at Punta Tech? I was like, look, I would love to. At that time, you didn't have this new variant for Corona. And, I was like, I'm going to try and be here in person. but I don't know, whether I will be able to make it. But I also asked him, why are you calling me? Seba is in Uruguay. I think Seba should speak about dLocal and not me. And Sergio said something really interesting. He said, yes, of course, Seba can speak easily. He is going to be at Punta. But it'll be good to have someone who comes in from the outside to share their thoughts about dLocal. And that really struck a chord in my mind, and that's why I'm speaking about it, which is, for those of you who really don't believe in inclusion or diversity, or, when you think about words like that and you cringe because it doesn't really mean much. I was reading a book about wokeism, and it was interesting because it challenged this idea of representation. And do you need representation? Does representation need to be forced? And what does that mean? Should the next Pixar movie have a child where the child looks like my son so that he feels that he could have the same chance of becoming a hero? And is that important? Similarly, should more women be on boards? And should that be actually required by law? Should the exchanges actually put conditions on why companies should have more women on the board? And the answer could be both ways, depending on how you feel about these issues. For many of you, it may feel very forced. Why do we need rules around it? Why shouldn't it happen organically? Why shouldn't women and minorities become part of the overall corporate process in an organic manner? But I do feel that representation matters. And so thank you for having me here. And it's great to be part of this ecosystem. And for those of you who are in positions of power, whether you are a CEO, a financier, or a business manager, or you lead a team, you can all make a difference. You can all think about, are you hiring and are you adding people into your teams with an open mind? Or are you hiring people who look exactly like you, who've gone to the same schools, who come from the same background? Or are you willing to challenge who you bring to the table by adding other people who may not look like you? And I think that is something that could change how we all live. And I do think representation matters. So thank you for having me here.